President Trump has widened the global trade war he started since retaking the White House. He's announced a 25% tariff on all cars imported into the United States from the 2nd of April. The US president claimed the measures would spur growth in the US car industry and create jobs and investment.
It started with a decision, one that few saw coming and even fewer were prepared for. In 2025, the US government imposed a 25% tariff. But this wasn't aimed at Chinese imports or steel from Europe. This time, Washington turned its attention to Japan. Not to factories in Tokyo or Yokohama, but to Japanese automakers operating inside America itself. Factories in Tennessee, Alabama, and Ohio, plants owned by Toyota, Honda, and Nissan, were suddenly caught in the political crossfire. These weren't just foreign corporations shipping products to American shores, they were embedded in the heart of local communities. They hired American workers, paid union wages, and in many towns, they were the largest employers around. The tariff didn't just slap a price hike on vehicles, it sent a message. One that many in the industry say was both unexpected and deeply personal. No matter how much you've contributed, you're still an outsider. For years, Japanese automakers had done what most foreign companies are urged to do. They brought their operations to U.S. soil. They trained American workers, partnered with local suppliers, and even led the charge into electric vehicles. Over 3.2 million vehicles are produced annually by Japanese car makers in the U.S. These aren't just cars. They're paychecks, school donations, community centers, and futures built in places often overlooked by Wall Street. The Toyota RAV4 is built in Kentucky. The Honda Accord rolls off the line in Ohio. The Nissan Leaf, one of the most affordable electric vehicles on the market, comes from Tennessee. Toyota alone invested nearly $14 billion into a battery plant in North Carolina, projected to create 5,000 new jobs, an anchor for the country's clean energy transition. But all of that was called into question with the stroke of a pen. Unlike past trade disputes, Japan didn't lash out. There were no fiery press conferences, no retaliatory tariffs. Instead, the response was quiet and calculated. Within weeks of the new tariff, cracks in the relationship began to show. In Japan's Kyushu region, Nissan scaled back production of over 13,000 SUVs originally destined for U.S. buyers. Toyota shifted its electric vehicle manufacturing plans away from Alabama and toward Thailand, where a new plant is expected to churn out 100,000 EVs a year. Then came the biggest signal yet, a $2 billion deal by Toyota to open a state-of-the-art electric vehicle facility in Shanghai. It wasn't just about business expansion, it was a strategic pivot, and a clear sign that Japan was no longer betting its future on Washington. But this pivot didn't happen overnight. Back in 2018, during the first wave of Trump-era tariffs, Japanese companies started quietly preparing for a world where American protectionism wasn't just a threat, it was policy. They didn't wait to be caught off guard a second time. As U.S. trade rhetoric grew more aggressive, Japanese automakers began planning contingency moves throughout Asia. So when the 2024 tariffs hit, they didn't panic, they executed. This shift is now sending ripples through the entire U.S. auto industry, particularly in the fast-growing electric vehicle sector. Ironically, the very companies Washington was trying to promote, like Ford and General Motors, are now more reliant than ever on the same international supply chains that were just targeted. Take Ford's much-celebrated F-150 Lightning. It's made in America, but its critical components aren't. The lithium that powers its batteries comes from China. General Motors' cutting-edge Ultium platform is built on Korean tech. While politicians wave the flag, the vehicles themselves tell a more complicated story. Even when it comes to tax credits, the inconsistencies are glaring. Japanese hybrid vehicles, many of which are more fuel-efficient than U.S. brands, don't qualify for government incentives simply because they weren't made by a Detroit manufacturer. That decision has alienated longtime partners and created resentment in regions that have long supported American auto manufacturing, regardless of the brand. At the center of this storm are the people, American workers. More than 2.2 million U.S. jobs are tied to Japanese car makers. That includes not just factory employees, but parts suppliers, transport workers, and thousands of local businesses that depend on the economic engine these plants provide. These aren't abstract figures. These are families in Kentucky, Ohio, and Alabama who are now watching their futures hang in the balance. While Washington talks about national pride and strategic independence, much of the electric vehicle supply chain is slipping through its fingers. Countries like China are moving fast. Beijing is rolling out massive subsidies for new energy vehicles and locking down global partnerships. The Chinese company BYD is already working alongside Toyota to develop next-gen solid-state batteries. The kind of breakthrough that could make EVs more efficient and affordable, if you're building them in the right place. That place, increasingly, is no longer the United States. Meanwhile, Japan, Korea, and China are tightening their ties across the Asia-Pacific. New trade routes are being formed, new supply chains are emerging, and Southeast Asia is becoming the next automotive powerhouse. From Vietnam to Indonesia, factories are popping up, and EVs are being built faster than expected. It's no longer just about exporting cars. It's about writing the rules of the next industrial era. The US used to be at the center of those rules. Now it's watching from the sidelines. Across the Pacific, something big is taking shape, and America isn't part of it. While Washington focused on tariffs and tightening its grip on legacy industries, Asia was quietly redrawing the map of the global economy. One trade deal, one factory, one battery at a time. It started with Japan, but it didn't end there. Tokyo wasn't just reacting to US tariffs. It was adapting, aligning itself with regional partners through new agreements and long-range industrial strategy. Japan doubled down on the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, a trade pact the US helped design, then walked away from. Now, Japan is helping lead it. That wasn't just symbolic, it was structural. It gave Japan and its partners a framework to move forward without relying on Washington, and others followed. South Korea began reassessing its own position. With its tech sector among the most advanced in the world and growing demand for semiconductors, electric vehicles, and clean energy infrastructure, Seoul started looking east, not west, for its next chapter. Samsung, a titan in chip manufacturing, explored deeper partnerships with China. Korean automakers began expanding operations in Southeast Asia. It wasn't a rejection of the United States, it was insurance. A bet on resilience in case America decided to close more doors. And then there's ASEAN. The 10-nation bloc of Southeast Asian countries is emerging as the next big auto and tech hub. Countries like Thailand, Vietnam, and Indonesia are becoming the new front line for manufacturing, backed by growing middle classes, government incentives, and infrastructure deals led by China. Thailand, for example, has become Toyota's new base for electric vehicle exports. Vietnam is gaining traction as a chip and battery hub. Indonesia, rich in nickel, a crucial component in electric vehicle batteries, is now central to new supply chain plans. It's like watching a new Detroit rise, except it's not in Michigan. It's being built across tropical coastlines and megacities, with input from Tokyo, Seoul, and Beijing. And here's where China really changed the game. While the US was raising walls, China was laying tracks, literally and figuratively. With its Belt and Road Initiative already transforming infrastructure across Asia and Africa, Beijing saw the green energy transition as the next big race. They didn't hesitate. The Chinese government poured billions into electric vehicle subsidies. Local governments fast-tracked permits for battery plants and chip factories. And perhaps most importantly, Beijing opened its doors to foreign automakers in a way that made them feel like partners, not guests. Toyota's $2 billion electric vehicle plant in Shanghai wasn't just about cutting costs. It was about positioning the company inside the world's largest EV market with the fastest-growing tech ecosystem. At the same time, Toyota and China's BYD teamed up to push the development of solid-state batteries, a leap forward in range, safety, and charging speed. If they succeed, it will set a new global standard, and it won't be an American one. In addition to batteries, China is tightening its grip on upstream components. Lithium, cobalt, rare earth minerals. China already dominates processing and refining. That means even when US automakers claim their EVs are American-made, the critical materials in their powertrains often start in China or pass through its industrial pipeline. That's a vulnerability Washington can't easily talk its way out of. Meanwhile, US tax credits aimed at encouraging domestic EV production ended up exposing a contradiction. Hybrids from Japan, even if more efficient than US models, were excluded from key incentives. That wasn't about environmental impact, it was about branding. Washington wanted to reward Made in America but punished companies that had already built deep roots here simply because their logos weren't from Detroit. The irony? Ford and GM, the supposed beneficiaries of these policies, still rely heavily on foreign suppliers. Ford's EV trucks depend on lithium from China. GM's battery platform depends on Korean components. And while US politicians talk about building a clean supply chain, the tools to actually do it are already slipping away. This isn't just about manufacturing, it's about influence. In the past, economic power came from writing the rules of global trade. The US did that for decades. It built institutions, wrote standards, and led negotiations. But now, as America backs away from multilateral trade agreements and leans harder into protectionism, others are stepping in. China is promoting the yuan in cross-border trade. Digital currencies, like China's digital yuan, are starting to reshape how deals are made. Quietly, Japan and Korea are exploring how they could plug into this new ecosystem. If that happens, it would mark a shift not just in technology, but in financial power. And tariffs? They can't stop digital currency. You can't sanction a blockchain. Back home, the impact is already being felt. Small towns once buzzing with auto jobs are seeing slowdowns. Suppliers are reconsidering future investments. Even local officials in states like Alabama and Ohio, traditionally pro-industry, are beginning to question whether Washington's strategy is helping or hurting. In the halls of power, the conversation remains political. But on the factory floors and dealership lots, the consequences are real. This isn't a simple case of one bad policy. It's about a broader shift, one that began years ago but is accelerating fast. The world isn't waiting for the US to lead anymore. It's moving forward with or without it. The United States now finds itself at a crossroads, one paved with decisions it made and opportunities it may have lost. What was once seen as a bold stance for American jobs is now exposing the country's fragile grip on the future of clean technology and global trade. The tariffs on Japanese automakers didn't just strain one relationship. They triggered a deeper unraveling of trust between the US and its longtime allies in Asia. And once that kind of trust is broken, rebuilding it isn't as simple as reversing a policy. The first option in front of Washington is straightforward on paper, but politically complex. Repair the damage. That means revisiting tariff policies, opening channels for industrial collaboration, and rethinking the narrow lens of Made in America in a globalized world. It would require active cooperation with Japan, South Korea, and even regional neighbors like Canada and Mexico, perhaps strengthening the USMCA as a serious vehicle for electric vehicle integration. But here's the catch. Time is running out. Global supply chains don't wait for speeches or election cycles. Factories are being built now. Contracts are being signed now. Partnerships are deepening, often without American involvement. While US officials debate over who gets tax breaks and which company counts as domestic, Asia is busy building the next generation industrial base. Together. The second path, letting go, accepting that the center of gravity has shifted eastward, and that America may not be part of the core group writing the rules of tomorrow's auto and tech economy. That outcome is no longer theoretical. It's already taking shape. In Shanghai, Toyota's massive EV plant is ahead of schedule. In Indonesia, nickel refineries tied to Korean and Chinese firms are beginning operations. In Vietnam, chip assembly for everything from cars to smartphones is being streamlined by regional pacts that bypass the United States entirely. And in Thailand, EV exports are set to rise over 30% this year alone, with growing demand in the Middle East, Africa, and Europe. These aren't temporary shifts, they're structural. Meanwhile, in Washington, policy is still stuck in a tug-of-war between industrial nostalgia and geopolitical anxiety. There's plenty of talk about reshoring, national security, and reviving American manufacturing, but little clarity on how to make it happen in a world that has moved far beyond borders. And that's the core contradiction. Washington wants global influence without global cooperation. You can't lead a coalition if you're pushing partners away. You can't build cutting-edge technology if you don't control the supply chain. And you can't compete in a clean energy future if your best allies are building it elsewhere, without you. That's why the quiet exit of Japan from America's EV ambitions is so significant. It didn't involve protests or retaliation. No dramatic walkouts. Just a steady redirection of effort, capital, and trust toward places where cooperation is more than just a word. And now, China is offering a new kind of power, not through military bases or threats, but through infrastructure, trade routes, and incentives, through the kind of soft power the US once used to define global order. In that context, tariffs look less like protection and more like retreat. And there's a third layer emerging. Digital money and trade automation. China's digital yuan is being tested in international transactions. Japan and Korea are quietly exploring how they might use blockchain systems to speed up trade flows without relying on traditional US-controlled banking networks. If that ecosystem grows, it won't just change how cars are built. It'll redefine who gets to shape the rules of global commerce. The US is trying to build walls in an age of digital bridges. Back on the ground, the effects are visible. American suppliers tied to Japanese automakers are slowing production. Local economies in the Midwest and Southeast are bracing for layoffs or stalled investment. And younger workers, many of whom trained for EV manufacturing jobs, are watching as those jobs shift overseas. It's a silent drain, not just of industry but of momentum. At a time when the US could have accelerated a clean tech revolution through its alliance network, it hesitated. It chose rigidity over adaptability. And now, it's watching that revolution take off from the sidelines. What could have been a united front, Japan's production, Korea's tech, US innovation, is becoming a fragmented race, and right now Asia is running faster. Still, it's not all lost. There is room to recalibrate. Washington could return to the table with real incentives for collaboration. It could recognize that in a globalized EV market, control isn't about making everything at home. It's about being part of the value chain at every stage. It's about alliances, not isolation. But that means facing some hard truths. That the American auto industry isn't fully American anymore. That most clean tech components will never be 100% domestic. That influence in the 21st century comes from flexibility, not brute force. The challenge is no longer just economic, it's philosophical. Does the United States want to shape the future, or just protect the past? Meanwhile, countries like Japan aren't waiting for an answer. They're moving on, discreetly, effectively, and with a long-term view that Washington seems to have lost. So, did America just hand over the future of clean transportation to its competitors? Maybe, but it doesn't have to end that way. Rebuilding trust takes more than policy. It takes presence. The United States can still be a leader, but only if it stops treating allies like adversaries and starts building a global strategy that reflects the complexity of the world as it is, not as it used to be. Because if this moment slips by, the next industrial revolution may not have room for a seat marked Made in America, and that, more than any tariff or trade deal, is what's truly at stake. So now the question falls to all of us. Was this a necessary stand for national strength, or a strategic misstep that may cost America its place in the future of global trade and innovation? Are we witnessing a temporary reshuffle, or a permanent shift in power? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think the US can rebuild trust with its allies before it's too late, or has the rest of the world already moved on? Drop your take in the comments below. We're listening. And if this report helped you understand the bigger picture, please support our work by giving this video a like, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss important updates on global trade, tech, and policy shifts. The world is changing fast, and we'll be right here helping you keep up.